5G at SDN NFV. Honestly, listening to the keynotes this morning, sometimes I was asking myself if this is SDN NFV World Congress or 5G World Congress, because a lot of talk was about 5G already, where I thought we mainly have this session to dive a bit deeper. And I said, well, I elaborate a little bit, what's the relationship between 5G and SDN NFV, and probably we heard part of the answer already. Not too much surprise, but let's look a little bit deeper. What is it? What do we need? How does one thing help the other? What are dependencies? What are potential blocking points here? Let's go a little bit back in time first. 2013, so we have 5 years of this Congress. Actually, it's the 6th one, if I count correctly, but it's 5 years now. So, and I haven't been there in 12, but I've been there in 2013. In a lovely German city called Bad Homburg. Anyone in here who was there in 2013? Oh, wow. Okay, so I'm the longest standing attendant to that conference. So back then, a colleague of mine introduced something we called the software-defined operator, where the first time we started to elaborate that future networks will be built in software and will run in cloud, so everything SDN NFV is all about. Now there's one thing missing on that picture. There is no 5G on it, because 2013, good old times, no 5G around, right? We had almost the same picture 2 years later in 2015 in a more well-known city called Düsseldorf. Almost the same picture, a little bit more beef, and there for the first time 5G appeared. There may be a relationship that in that year this 5G NGMN white paper has been released, where DT also was pretty active in it. So back then we already said that all these efforts of SDN NFV, obviously they are key building blocks to deliver 5G without knowing or elaborating in much detail what would it mean. If I would draw this picture today, it would look like this. So 5G is overshadowing anything, and we've seen it, as said in the morning. Even though this is SDN NFV, quite a lot of talk was already about 5G. Maybe it's almost a little bit too prominent, if you ask me, because 5G is still very high on the hype curve. I think it's coming down a little bit already, but it's still positioned a bit. It solves all the problems we didn't manage to solve in the past. Now, how much of that we can do, we'll go into it a bit more. I'm not talking the first time about 5G, and every time I talk about 5G, I use this picture because I like it a lot. It shows, of course, very nicely the evolution of the generations, and with 5G, you know that everything should be connected. But the best thing on that picture is the waste bin. And I know the person who did that picture did not do this on purpose. I figured it out sometimes later, because that waste bin is an important thing. Here showing it's connected, but it's also showing for me, in order to make this 5G vision happen, we need to do something which we are very bad at as an industry, throwing legacy away. If we don't do that, this 5G vision will never happen and can't happen in an efficient vision. It's very important that we start to lay off some of the legacy things. And we heard it again in the morning, how much complexity with running all these legacy features we create in our networks. We need to start to get rid of it. That's the key message on that picture, even though it's never been intended. That one, obviously, I hope, is there anyone who has not seen that kind of picture in one or the other form? At least you have seen it today in the morning in the Ericsson keynote. Probably in others as well, I haven't seen all of them. But these are the 3 dimensions we all expect 5G to deliver. This is some kind of industry consensus. We're talking about extreme broadband. It's here mobile, but in fact, we're talking about extreme broadband. We're talking about massive machine type, and we're talking about critical machine. This is ultra low latency, high reliability use case. 3 really orthogonal dimensions where we want 5G to deliver. Is there anyone in here who has never seen that before? Good. The problem is this is the only thing we're working currently as an industry. If you come to the hard reality of standards, which are absolutely key, 3GPP is still by far the most important fora to make 5G happen. They are fully concentrating on that. Why? Well, first place, that's something you can communicate to the public. This is all about consumer, and we are still a very much consumer-driven industry, but also because this is still an evolution approach. And it's always easier to build on things you know versus you do something fundamentally different. So today, what's happening in the industry is driving forward even only mobile broadband, so also this big topic of FMC, which I won't touch too much today, is not very much in focus. Very good to bring it to the market, to fulfill the delivery timelines that have been posted very prominently, but this is not delivering significant additional revenue. That's not going to come out of driving that one. For that, we really need to start to look in the other two dimensions, as we already have done in the past with narrowband IoT. This is a source of additional revenue which we didn't have before. And ultra reliable should pay in the same direction. Now, let's open up again and look at the big picture. As said, quite heterogeneous demands. Very clear we can't deliver that out of one network, so we need to have, let's see, this is working. There are a couple of building blocks we need to have to deliver all these demands. Ultra-dense networks, of course, if there is no connectivity, you can't deliver anything. We'll not go too deep on that one here, because this is SDN NFV, and this is not very much X-related. But then, of course, we have network slicing and cloud, networks in the cloud. So again, coming a bit back to the topic of this speech, how does cloud help us in 5G? And that's the functional part. But there is more. And again, it was already mentioned, it's very nice to have these early afternoon sessions because you can refer back to the keynotes in the morning. There was, I'm not 100% sure who said it. The one thing is to make it work. The other thing is to run it constantly. It doesn't help if you get the thing up and running if you then can't operate it in a decent manner. And so there are quite a lot of additional requirements on top of the functional ones to be able to run all these different kind of networks. So we have these 3 dimensions, but we need to be able to run all of them in an efficient manner. And we need a couple of different things fulfilled in order to really be able to run that. Top of the line, of course, cost efficiency. We all know, and we know the forecasts, data rates are going up, volumes are going up, revenues are not going up that much. So cost is still an extremely important topic, especially in the mobile broadband side, on the mobile broadband or on the broadband. We need to become much, much better on cost efficiency. So we're not talking about another 10, 20%. We're talking about much, much more severe numbers. Availability, reliability, obviously. You need to be able to provide stable service to your customer, probably even better to what you have today. Simplicity, very important topic. Some very much love to be overlooked. We're very good in adding, increasing complexity, and then scratching our heads, how the hell should we ever manage that whole thing? And we are just about to adding the next layer. That's why I mentioned the dustbin before. And also by design, of course, complexity is not going away, but we need to package it and put it in a way that we can efficiently manage it and run the networks. And that only works if you have a certain level of simplicity. Flexibility, time to market, of course, I think we don't need to talk too much about that one. Performance is a nice one, because it's also not that obvious how that should happen. Again, bandwidth is going up, latency is going down, so performance is totally critical. Now you can ask yourself, if performance is so important, why the hell do I put these things in the cloud, which by definition, with all this overhead of IT technology, probably even virtual machines, if we talk about where we are today, why do I put top technologies in the network that decrease performance if performance is so important? So where's the balance? What is the solution? If you remember the first slide of the keynote of Arash this morning, this famous topic of SIOV. Yes, it's the currently best technology to come to high performance, but we also know it doesn't fit to cloud. So there are a couple of still difficult points which we need to resolve to come to performance in that case. And finally, also something we are very good in forgetting, where we need to learn a lot and can learn a lot from web companies, build for scale. Design a system that in case it's going well, it's successful, it can ramp up, it can scale up without needing to redesign the whole thing because the architecture hits some strange limitations that hinders going up. So build for scale has to be in there right from the start. Good. Yeah, and then also something we tend to forget, security. Even more complex in the cloud environment, something we need to bring in right from the start, right? Good. The solution to all these things, no surprise here, is called network slicing. And network slicing means nothing else that we run networks in software, that we can run different implementations of networks with very different characteristics, with different business processes, with different life cycles, all deployed and running on a shared infrastructure, on a partly shared infrastructure. So being really, really flexible here. And that's very obvious. I guess nobody is surprised now. This is exactly where SDN and NFV comes into play big time. Because all the things I've told you, they are natural to the SDN NFV world, right? Nothing of that was, these operational requirements, they are not new and they are not necessarily specific to 5G. If you look at it, you'll find almost the same things just under the umbrella of SDN NFV, but that shows how closely the things are interrelated. Now coming back a little bit, how much cloud do you need? Do you need that necessarily to deploy mobile broadband in the very initial phase? No. No, of course not. You can, of course, still build it in a legacy way if you want to be fast. But obviously, then you are also stuck with today's models, with today's cost curve, with today's limitations. Good enough probably for a very first implementation to come to the market, but no way to start to realize all these additional benefits. Now looking at the benefits, in order to make that happen, what you need is a proper software architecture, right? And now we come a little bit to the discussion, and when you walk around here, there's one thing you can read almost everywhere, and again, we had it, I loved it a lot in the morning, cloud native. Everyone is talking about cloud native. And yes, we need it to realize all this and to deliver on all these requirements. The only way to do that efficiently, in my view, is developing and deploying a cloud native system. It's not only the software, that's why I call it a cloud native architecture. The whole architecture needs to be designed and run in a cloud way. Now, if you talk to most of the suppliers, they all tell you, yes, we are cloud native, but guys, you are not. Most of this is not cloud native. It's an adaptation of existing software. And again, it was mentioned at least 2 times. The only way to come there is to completely re-architect the software. Now, actually, 5G is a unique chance to do that because, again, remember the dustbin. We need to throw things away anyhow. Otherwise, we're getting by far too complex. And by throwing away legacy and redesigning cloud native, this is a unique chance, and probably the one and only in the next decade, to come to a proper forward-looking software architecture to run our networks as efficient as we require to stay competitive with the upcoming demands, to deliver on time, to deliver on the cost curve, and to still provide very, very good service to the customer. Now, we could now dig into all the details. I don't want to go into too much. Just a few topics. And if you ever looked into it, I guess you guys all know what's meant with cloud native. It's very much microservices based, API based, all stuff which is only done to a very limited extent if you look what's happening today in standards. Yes, there is this concept of service-based architecture. That's the first step, but that's not going far enough. And especially if you look at the size, yes, the new 5G core, release 15, they have changed a little bit, they renamed a lot, but in fact, it's a slightly adaptation of the EPC architecture. Still rather big building blocks, still quite a kind of black box software, so to say. So if I talk to suppliers, they tell me, yeah, we are microservice, we have internally, but it doesn't help me if I don't see the different building blocks. I may not need to see all of them, but I want to see a better granularity and be able to expose and make use of certain microservices which are today hidden in that kind of black box software in the system, right? Other things, very, very important from our perspective, separation of processing and data, because this gives you a complete new way how to design and realize reliability, availability. You have the data layer, and you have completely stateless, state efficient, still a discussion, processing pieces, and you don't need to care about any fallback and redundancy stuff, because this is all happening by this shared data layer. Extremely important. Everyone said yes, but if you go to standard meetings, extremely controversial discussions here, which I don't get. We're all clear this is the way to go, but somehow we are not able to agree as an industry how we should make that happen. Again, if you don't get that kind of architecture, all these claims and hopes what we want to get on 5G is simply not doable from my perspective. So that, and again, this is the unique chance in the industry to change it and to redesign the whole architecture. We don't get this chance that often here. There's a little bit more. I want to go too much into that one anymore. So if you talk to verticals, and why to verticals? Because the area where you require all this flexibility and the ability to deliver quickly and to be able to adapt to customer needs is a bit less on the consumer side. That's much more on the business sides of what we call verticals. There we see much more opportunity. We don't know exactly today what the requirements are. There's quite some work going on in the industry to engage with these guys, because this is not, in the past we said this is the product, here you have it and take it or leave it, but we see that this is not going to work going forward. We need to engage much more with these guys, understanding their demands, designing the capability of the network according to their demands, that may be simple things like latency or bandwidth, that may also be SLA related requirements, so there are much more dimensions, but in order to deliver that quickly, you need to have these software capabilities and this architecture in place. And that's exactly what they are asking for, right? So here we need to really be able to engage. So, summing up a bit. In order to design the 5G architecture in a proper way, so we really have, at least from my perspective, we are future-proof as much as we can from today's knowledge and today's point of view. Design the whole thing, and I didn't mention it too much, but it comes with the cloud mechanisms anyhow. Automation, scalability. We need to somehow, and that's not a trivial one here, I'm really curious, and it's quite a task for us as an industry, flexibility versus performance versus cost efficiency. That's not naturally coming together. If you want to be very flexible and very efficient at the same point, that's not trivial, because usually then you optimize, and if you want to be cost optimized at the same point, it gets another dimension of complexity. But we need to find solutions for that. And we need, again, to have this open, cloud-based, cloud-native architecture. Thank you.